All right, everybody, welcome back. Zeus with Bruce podcast here with a dear friend of mine, Charles. How we doing?
Doing good, man. Thank you for having me on.
Oh man, dude. I mean, how can I not have this guy on? First, you guys can't see through the audio because there's no vision. We're rocking a very similar hairstyle, and I definitely resonate with that. But
Dude,
your hair wasn't this
absolutely.
long when we met. Your hair wasn't this long when we
No,
met.
it was,
Yeah,
I
you
think I
were.
was going through one of my short hair phases,
Oh
working at my
man, I
corporate
remember
gig and
those.
everything.
Oof, we're getting right into
Yeah,
it. Well, because yeah, the corporate gig is sort of is like a cookie cutter, kind of puts you in this structure. I mean, you take it away, and how do you feel that it connected with your hair being short and kind of an identity in a way, right? Because here it's more free
absolutely.
flowing and go on, man.
Yeah, it's funny, like, a couple of rules I was taught, and it's funny how this ties into identity and career, um, and even what led up to who I was at the time when we met really came down to you know certain rules such as don't get tattoos below the elbow. Enjoy long hair now so that you can get a high paying job later where that job is going to require you to look clean cut.
Mm,
And other sorts of little nuances like that that ultimately meant I felt that I could not be who I wanted to be at the job. And so now we're at
mm,
a place where that world is now being encouraged, and they're being encouraged to allow people to be themselves, to help them be their most authentic self as a way to encourage what their energy looks like. And so
yep.
for me, when I had short hair, it was devastating afterwards when I found out that I didn't need to cut my hair at all because I was in
Oh
inside
man.
sales.
Oh,
So,
dude, I'd be so upset.
you know, yeah,
I'd be so
ultimately
upset.
it was this big conundrum.
Jeez, man. Yeah, because that was what. So then let's just give some kind of a time frame. That was 2019. So
Just
no, that
about,
was
yeah.
yeah, right before
Yeah.
2020 began, because we had touch base. We went to a wedding of a mutual friend of ours in India, of all places. I was in Israel at the time. You
Seriously.
were in Florida, so you were in Florida, right? Before you
No,
went?
I was still in Nashville at that
Oh, you were
time.
still there. Okay.
And yeah, that was shortly before the pandemic. That was the
Oh
last
my
time I had
god.
traveled outside of the US. It was
Oh man.
definitely worth it.
No,
I think I
absolutely.
said yes within like 3 days of
Oh,
needing to fly out.
wait, really? That much? It was that sort of time that you had?
Yeah, I had to rush to get everything taken care of as far as
Oh
I guess
man.
just international approvals. It was an around the clock race, but I was like, you
Man.
know what? If if I can just get my ticket and everything else is gonna be good, I think that's a fair experience.
Right. Oh, 100%. 100%. So then that's when you're saying like that was not the genesis, but when your hair was in such a different spot, right? Because you had cut it and then you realized like, you're kind of adopting this identity in a way. And there was some inner
Yep.
conflict because when we met at, it was a what was that, like a 5 day wedding, 7 day wedding or something? It was a
Oh
lot.
goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
it
was
was
just,
it was
it was a lot.
yeah, and so that inner conflict at the time, it's funny. It wasn't even related to just hair. It was
Mm.
also related to this entire um, crisis that I was in. Most folks, um, I think, could relate when it comes to like what experiencing a heartbreak feels like, and
Oh.
like
Hmm.
when you're walking through that along with other difficult family matters and
Mm.
other struggles that I had going on at the time, such as I was dealing with some really hefty destructive habits,
Okay.
addictions,
Wow.
substance abuse. And
Mm.
it was those things ultimately that I tried to solve, for example, through body modification, changing my hair color, cutting my hair, ultimately shaving my hair, getting all sorts of piercings and tattoos, anything that I could to try and become a person that I liked rather than recognizing where I was at and being able to just accept that present moment and live in the beauty of just having breath in my lungs, you know? And
Wow.
ultimately, that's where everything changed.
So what was the catalyst then? You're saying the breath in your lungs. Was there a moment that it was a near death experience? It was just an intense realization? What was the catalyst there, or really the tipping point?
So I actually posted about this fairly recently. There was a couple of tipping points, and I would like to say I'm a pretty extreme personality. So when it
Hmm.
comes to things such as near death experiences,
Sure.
some people will have one where it's like, hey, we flipped a car going 85 an hour. For
My
me, it
brother
was
did
more
that, by the
about
way.
that.
He did.
Goodness,
He
man.
did. Literally. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure he wouldn't mind me sharing the quick story. It's like, yeah, same
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
85 miles, car flips, and then yeah, it's a mess.
Yeah, and yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things where like I by the point that I had started really entering and accepting that I was in a life crisis
Hmm.
in my early 20s, I had already by then been in a car wreck as a passenger
Oof.
where we hit a pole. Um,
Oh,
it was almost head on. I swear to you, by the grace of God, that car moved an inch over, and we were able
yeah.
to fly past just a little bit that I'm now still alive. And so
Hmm.
I had already had a fair share of near death experiences, that being one of the major ones. But like what happened was I was living it up. I had the sales gig. I was making big money, um, and I was making lots of stupid decisions. I was getting drunk every night. I was really not living the life that I knew I was supposed to be living. And I got to this moment where I just got a little too drunk, and I was all alone. And so I decided to hit a bar. And after the bar, I went to the bathroom a little bit, and then I got in front of the mirror, and this 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 empty feeling started welling up inside of me, and I punched the mirror,
Oh.
and right as I punch it, someone walks into the bathroom, and so I kind of just run out pretending like nothing just happened. But I felt this emptiness that I had never acknowledged before, and it was always there. But for the first time, I really had an awareness of that emptiness, the hurt, the traumas that had boiled up in my life that I had been trying to get rid of, but I was trying to solve those traumas and those problems by buying my way out of it or trying to
Hmm.
bury them, ignore them, run away from them. And ultimately, the substances were a way to suppress what I was going through. But we
Hmm.
all know that suppression doesn't work because ultimately it's like a canister of gas. And at some point, that canister is going to pop a leak somewhere and everything goes wrong with that when it finally happens. And
Hmm.
that was the first moment for me that things hit the fan, man. And
Wait, that wasn't the first moment, or you're saying that was like the real
that
big one?
so that was one of the biggest
Okay, okay.
moments.
So like, I think this is so important to notice too,
Yeah,
because a lot of the times there's some events that are small, then you manage to survive it or get away with it without any repercussions, but you never really get away with anything, right? It's like there's a constant score that's kept over the course of your life, and either you're voting for one of two sides, right? You're voting for the side that's going to be in alignment with your values and what you want, or the
yeah,
opposite that's going to be destructive and destroy you from the inside out. So for this,
eh,
it's like there was a lot of things coming up, and then this one was really a tipping point in that same moment.
absolutely.
Yeah,
So
that's powerful, man.
we should definitely touch on this moment, on
Yeah.
this topic later of creation versus destruction.
Okay.
Alluding to it a little bit, it's this template that I've used to explain every part of my life when it comes to the fact that there's no such thing as neutrality, and a lot of people are too scared to create, but they are also too scared to destroy. And
Hmm.
ultimately, there's good ways of addressing both. But if you're neutral, you're actually living in destructive habits, which ultimately, it steals from our future. So,
Yeah.
um, so really quick, jumping back,
Yeah.
when
Please go ahead.
after I had punched the mirror, I kind of just went back to the bar, and from there, everything became a blur. Next thing I know, it's 3 a.m. I'm sitting in my car covered in puke, and I look at my phone, and apparently I've been on a phone call for about 2.5 hours with my friend, and he says, look, man, everything's gonna be okay. And I just remember in that single moment, crying and laughing, like, this is it. This is the end. This is the end of the road. My life stopped. And I remember shouting at the top of my lungs, I don't want to be alive anymore.
Oh man.
And from there, I hung up the phone and I jumped out of the car, and I'm in this huge parking lot. I just scream, and the void of emptiness. You can hear the city sirens in the background. You can hear the cars on the highway in the background, and there's no response. I hear nothing. I feel nothing other than the rage that I have allowed to boil up. And ultimately, we know that those are secondary types of emotions: anger, um, um, madness, frustration. Those
Frustration. Yeah.
sorts of things,
Hmm.
secondary. I didn't recognize the pain that was being caused, which ultimately led to this frustration of, why do I feel this way? Because I didn't understand the pain that I was feeling. I didn't know about triggers, trauma, how to process difficult situations that have happened. um, and so that was the tipping point um, where after I had gotten home, I started doing some research, and I Googled how to fix your brain. And that was when
Right.
everything started to really take a crazy change, because
Oh.
I'll mention something you said earlier. It was about, um, nothing changes until the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of
Mm.
change. And
Yeah, that was
so
in the. Yeah, yeah, nice. Okay, yeah,
there,
that's in one of the earlier
yeah,
ones. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, man,
yep.
that's
So
true.
that was where this all began. Was I realized, oh my goodness, I don't like where I'm at. It's time. It's time to make some changes.
You've reached a threshold, is what they call it, right? So it's like a threshold of pain.
Yeah.
That at that point, it's like, yeah, if you continue the same behavior, it's like the same thing for me. I'll just use a much simpler one, not one that's on the same level. Like, let's just say biting my nails. It's always been a terrible habit. It's the that comes from it, and I would do it, and then to some points I do it where my cuticles would come off, and I'd start
Mm,
bleeding, and it'd be painful. I thought, you know what? This hurts. No, it's like it's really not that bad. So you keep justifying justification, but then at a certain point, I realized that in a certain field that I'm entering now in business with working with people and stuff like that, if you really want to talk about health and taking care of yourself and you're not doing it and they can see your fingers, it's going to be bad. So for myself, I didn't want to continue like the pain of not changing was going to lose me the ability to work with people and have conversations like these. So then I got to a point saying, yeah, it's got to change. And that's
yeah,
so low level, the same kind of template. So what you're talking about. But please continue with the threshold. I love
absolutely.
it.
So from I just to see, set the understanding, I do
Yeah.
not agree with the use of any substances when it comes to changing your life, especially illegal substances. But
Mm.
what ended up happening was I started digging into all these weird things, such as lucid dreaming. Hey, maybe I can figure out my problems while I'm asleep. Or astral projection. Hey, maybe I'm just not connected enough spiritually. Or hallucinogens. Hey, let's reconnect with the earth and everything. And
Yeah.
ultimately, that was the route that I chose that took me down this really crazy rabbit hole of, what does it mean to actually fix or heal your brain? Like, what is the outcome that I'm looking for? And ultimately, I
Mm.
didn't know. But I started reading more about getting into heavier dosages of things. And I started traveling the spirit realms. I started to see things that I never could have imagined were real. And once again, I don't believe this is ever a right solution. I'm very not. I'm not about it anymore. But
You're
I
saying more
per-
like quote unquote like naturalistic healing, more holistic, and just kind of being avoidant of it.
hallucinogens as a
Okay.
solution to trauma.
Okay. Okay. Sure. Sure.
Um, and ultimately, it's because I believe there's better methods to get the outcomes that we're seeking from
Yeah.
those hallucinogens. And those, and it's widely being tested. Hey, I think that's it. I say let's go. Let's figure out what it's all about. Um,
Mm.
and ultimately, that was where I was able to experience something really, truly
Repeat that part. It
because
cut out a little. Can you repeat the last 5 seconds? It cut out a
yeah,
little
it
bit.
was what I began to experience was truly divine. It was spiritual. It was powerful. It was a way that I was able to make that final leap into my new life. And it was where I ended up taking this really huge dosage. And I went over to my bed and I thought, hey, oh my goodness, I hope I didn't just take anything that's going to kill me. I started getting
Oh
super
my God,
paranoid.
dude, that's
So
so
I laid
horrifying.
down. Yeah, and
Oh
I
my
said to
word.
myself, let's just sleep it off. Now it's funny because I
And maybe
posted
wake
about
up.
this the other
Maybe we'll
day.
wake up. Yeah, maybe we'll wake up. Let's see
Yeah,
what happens.
maybe we'll wake up. But
Right.
this dude commented, "Oh, I'm trying to end your life. Join the
Hmm.
club, bro." And I'm like, "No, that's
Wow.
not what I was trying to do. I
Wow.
wanted to live. That's why I was trying to do this." Um, but what ended up happening was I started seeing these visuals in my head of life going on without me, where all of my friends and my loved ones were just living and I wasn't
Oh.
there. And that
Hmm.
was a scary thing to feel like I was there, but I wasn't. And I couldn't talk to
Yeah.
them. I began to fall into my grave over and over for hours.
Hmm.
I was surrounded by my loved ones looking down at me, falling in that grave over and over for hours. I mean,
Oh, that's hell. That's hell.
that
It
literally
really
it.
is,
I
man. I
am,
mean, yeah. Wow. Wow.
and that was where and this was a moment that changed everything in my entire life. It was the moment that I sprung out of bed and said, "That is not the life that I want." And I went to the bathroom and I threw up everything that I had taken. And I felt this mountain lift off of my shoulders. This weight was gone. This burden of a painful existence suddenly disappeared, all in a single moment. And when I woke up, I was awake, but I woke up a different person when I got up from throwing up everything, and I was like, oh my goodness, what world am I in? I literally felt like I had entered a different universe, and for me,
Yeah.
that was one of the most powerful breakthroughs I'd experienced because that that I had been living with this lens over my entire life. And that's the problem with this, is we think that boom, one bad incident happens and then suddenly life is a train wreck, but it's not true. It's 100 billion little incidents where we collect these beliefs and we reinforce them over time, and I
Yep.
have been doing that my entire life. um, and ultimately, I can see now how that was tied back to uh, really just the behaviorisms, the mannerisms that we produce when we're children to experience pain or pleasure, or I mean, avoid pain and chase
Gain pleasure.
pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so um, being
Wow,
able to
man.
boil it down scientifically, like it makes me feel a lot better about the idea that it's not just a magical experience. I believe in the supernatural, but I also believe that we have a lot of authority as humans. I mean, everything about us, we are incredible. But that's why I also had the choice as an incredible human being to choose if I was going to live a life of someone that am I going to take my authority, make something of this. I want to make something
Hmm.
of that I have,
Yeah.
where I may not have everything figured out. I may not be the best at everything, but I want it. I want it. I want it. And if there's enough desire, a desire to change, a desire to grow, a desire to build and create, and ultimately, I look at it as living the life of a movie that each person would want to live in.
Hmm.
Um, if it was the perfect movie ever, what's the movie of your life?
Yeah,
And
man. I
some
mean,
people have
we're all
tragedies,
living
you
one.
know.
Yeah, there are
There,
like
yeah,
tragedies. That's true. It is true,
but
man. I mean, there's so much stuff you're touching on, but look at how you come close to really the precipice in a way,
yep.
and it's this really middle ground. And yeah, you're in this moment because I've had something similar, and for me that was really tough. Where you said that you can envision yourself basically gone, and then having family members there, and you're visualizing it. And
Yep.
in a way, mine was very similar. And the one thing that changed was I was able to kind of envision my own obituary
Mm.
in the newspaper or something like that. And then one, it's like not much was done on paper. Of course, you impact people, and if it's not on paper, it's fine. But so that's a different way. It just made me reevaluate and think: is this the same path I want to continue on? Is this really the legacy you want to leave? And regardless of if your legacy is remembered for, let's say, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years, 100, 200, 300, what impact are you going to do now? Because even by going down this pattern that you're talking about, right, where it was the drinking and these other things and just doing everything in excess, that it's of course not only hurting you, it's hurting and affecting the people you actually say you care about. And that's something that I think we often forget, that we're free to make our own decisions 100%. We have autonomy relatively. That's something I think differently a little bit. But what are the consequences of our actions, not just on ourselves, but the people who didn't even choose what we did, but still suffer because of what we did? So it's like finding that sort of not balance, I would say, but just the awareness that you're responsible for that. Because if not, let's just say hypothetically, Charles, that you continued and you're 26 now, right? Okay, I think there's a pause in the video. Charles, can you hear me?
Yep. Go ahead.
Okay, no worries. I think it may have lagged. My connection is really bad, so I
Yep.
mean, when people are listening on the podcast, be like, what's this 5 second pause? No, but I was asking your age right now. You're 26, 24?
About to be 25 soon.
Okay, happy early birthday.
Thank
So
you.
let's say then, let's rewind. That night happens, but no change occurs. You didn't reach that threshold. The pain of changing was greater than, or vice versa. The pain of not addressing your life, right, really took a hold. What would it be like for you now? How would you be celebrating your 25th birthday?
So, it lagged a little. You said if I were to celebrate my 25th birthday having not made the change.
Yes. Like, where would you, how would you be celebrating your birthday? Would you even be around to celebrate it? What would that look like?
So, it's interesting you asked that. I knew when I was actually um, changed that if I hadn't have made the changes, um, that I would not be alive today. I would be dead in a ditch. And
Ditch. Wow. Wow.
because what ended up happening was, yeah, I felt a burden lift, but
Hmm.
then came the real battle. The battle of returning to my destructive habits or destroying them completely forever.
Hmm.
Um, and making that choice to come to life, people might think, well, hey, some people just get zapped by God and they're instantly good, and others may think,
Hmm.
well, hey, I have to do all of the work on my own, and whatever people end up deciding life change looks like for them. Ultimately, for me, I didn't actually reach that moment where I had true freedom until about, I think, a year and a half to 2 years later.
Hmm.
Um, I made the decision that I wanted to live. That was the most important. But then when it came to the battle, my goal was get set free from my 12-year porn addiction before
Hmm.
I'm 23,
And
and
also,
I managed to.
I'm writing about that in a book I'm
Yeah.
working on.
Okay. Okay.
Insanely destructive, horrific. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like the worst thing that can be done, basically. But continue, because like that's
Yeah.
such an important topic. And yeah, I mean, we can dabble a little with that. I would actually like
Yep.
to, but continue on here, and then we can explore more.
Absolutely. So what ended up happening was um I had gotten set free from the 12-year porn addiction about a month ish after my 23rd birthday,
Hmm.
along with being set free completely from my substance abuse problems. Um, is the first real outlet that I had. Um, when I had collected all these frustrations in my younger days, but I had no way to express them and get rid of them. Um, and so I compartmentalized them. And then I discovered porn and decided to stick with that. And ultimately, it destroyed a lot of my youth. It
Oh,
destroyed
yep,
um,
yep.
everything about who I was, you know? And then as I got older, that was when the dopamine hit didn't hit the same.
It
You
never
start looking
does.
for
Never does.
more
Yep.
violent, more gruesome things. You
Uh-huh.
start um, looking for new ways to achieve that same high, and it doesn't happen. So eventually, I came across drugs. You know,
Mm.
I became a chronic smoker. I was, I never liked cigarettes, but um, I was highly addicted to nicotine, highly addicted to smoking weed. And people think, oh well, weed's just weed. You can't be addicted. But see, I've tested this out. I've been the guinea pig for my own life, as we all are.
Yep.
Um, but I've heard people say things like, oh, if I don't get my coffee, I get a migraine. Um,
Wow.
and
Wow. So you're
you know,
saying maybe
it,
those are like euphemisms for like if I don't get my drug, I get like how would you say it? Withdrawal, basically. Is that it? Or
exactly.
yeah, it's that's incredible. Yeah.
So the problem ultimately with saying that, if you don't get your fix, that you're going through
Yes.
withdrawal, is
Yep.
that it all starts from the internal battle. You
Mm.
can be so incongruent inside. It doesn't matter if you're going to meth or caffeine or nicotine, whatever the fix is, it is ultimately a band-aid for an internal wound that you need to heal, because habit ultimately, when one doesn't work, they stack up. And that's where either you give in to the pain forever, um and or it comes to this point where, for me, I had to change. And so, like, I can pick up coffee and put it down whenever I want now. It doesn't matter if there's a headache or not, because I'm not focused on any
Mm.
present pain from a biological withdrawal. I know that I'm not addicted to it, so it doesn't matter.
Mm.
When I got set free from nicotine, all I did was read a book that was convincing enough for me to put it down.
Which one?
It was here. Actually, let me look up the title. It
Yeah,
was
look it up because
how
I mean
I.
this will be a magical cure. That'll be incredible because I got some buddies here who are smoking like a chimney, and
Oh,
some of them have stopped, but yeah, it would be great to give a resource like that.
yeah. So the book that I read it literally in a day, cover to cover.
Oh,
It was
dang, that
so
good.
powerful. It's called "Save Me from Myself: How I Found God, Quit Corn, and Kicked Drugs, and Lived to Tell My Story."
Wait, so that's
And
like,
it's
did you co-author this book? Because I think that's like sounds like that's what we're doing now. I like
if
that.
only, man. This
Oh
was by
man,
the guy who Corn, as in Korn.
Ko.
Um,
Okay,
let's see,
that's funny.
Brian Head Welsh. And he, yeah, as I was reading his story, it was just really convincing, because I recognized myself in this story over and over again, having this problem that I
Wow.
kept going back to, even though I didn't want to, watching how having this problem destroyed every friendship and relationship around me.
Mm,
Um, and I felt so convicted that I literally put nicotine down that day. And
wow.
um, that was after I had picked it up and put it down, and picked it up and put it down multiple times. And so, reading this, I was like, I'm called out. Now, it didn't stop me from smoking weed, and it didn't stop me from porn, but it was the first step that I really taken in the right direction. Shortly after that, I had gotten addicted to a lot of fast foods, so I had decided to go on a little 4-week challenge to free myself from it. And I
Hmm.
noticed the hunger that my stomach had for certain fast food cravings, and I had aware of that kind of attachment to fast food. So once I got set free from
Yeah.
that, I realized, oh my goodness, I don't want to go back to that. And then I took a 90-day challenge to see if I could stay free from weed for 90 days. Ultimately, I didn't. And that was where I started to really recognize my limits. I started to recognize
Mm,
my mental toughness, and
mm.
how it really wasn't there. I had learned about taking personal responsibility, but I really
Yeah,
didn't
that's a good one.
understand how even in my personal responsibility, I could still make the wrong choices.
Oh, you could have all
Um,
the right intentions and still end up doing the
yeah,
wrong things.
yeah,
Absolutely. And plus,
exactly.
it's also the strategy and the method, right? Like, there's a nice expression that I always like to use when something like this comes up. It's like when you have a certain goal in mind or a desire and objective, but your strategy's all kind of out of alignment. It goes, it's like you're running east and you're looking for a sunset, right? Because no matter how
Yeah,
far you're going
no, that's
east, the
exactly
sunset's in the
it.
west.
Um,
I love this one. So it's really
yeah,
similar to this
literally.
one. It's really similar to this one.
So what ended up happening after I had gone through all these little challenges, these little trial runs and tests of freedom, the pain began to stack up because at that point I had said, all right, God, I give up. You can have the wheel to my life. I don't know what I'm doing. By
Mm,
that point, we're in the pandemic. Um, and I had started to large amounts of weed that I thought, hey, I'm running low on money. Let me go and try and make a couple bucks. But what ended up
mm,
happening was I was still so addicted and broken and full of trauma that I would smoke all of it. And we're talking
mm.
amounts that 10 people should be able to split up. I would take it all down on my own within a day or two.
Well, for
Um,
10 people, for yourself, you could do that.
yeah, and some folks might say like, oh well, that's nothing, or
Well,
whatever you throw
I
out
guess
there.
it is
But
relative, though, right? It is not like
yeah,
relative, but yeah, some people can just blow like a chimney, and then others, you take one, and then you're out for the count. I mean,
yeah,
the beginner days, it
and
was kind of like that.
exactly. And so for me, I had gone from this place where I remember the very first time I had gotten drunk and high at the same time, and I was
Trust.
I was literally throwing up for hours. The
Oh,
room
it's
was
the worst
spinning all
feeling,
around
man.
me. It,
From what
it
I hear,
is.
it's the worst feeling.
Yeah, yeah. And
Joking.
it was just that moment where suddenly I'm sitting here high off my rocker, and I realize, wow, I'm able to get a billion times higher than I ever used to be when I didn't do this stuff.
Mm,
How far have I fallen? Um,
oof.
and even though I had told God I was going to give him the wheel back, I didn't make any changes because I knew I couldn't change. So he literally,
Mm,
from my perspective, he started telling people, regardless of what people believe about faith, these
sure.
divine supernatural encounters started happening where random people would show up to my into my house, such as this time my computer broke and a computer repairman came over. He happened to be a believer, and he asked if he could pray for me, and I was like, okay, if you want to, that's cool, man. And weird random encounters started happening that all over the place, and then I met my wife about I met my wife 3 days after, reconnected with her because we had been friends for a few years, but I had really um, um, put that on hold. I had really disconnected from her because I was so full of shame and guilt over all the dirt in my life. And so throughout these little encounters with people and reconnecting with my now wife, I ultimately reached this breaking point where,
Mm.
man, I didn't make this mark. I thought I was going to be 23 and free, but I wasn't. And so,
It sounds nice, but
um,
it's very like uncommon.
yeah, yeah. And a lot of what I had craved at the time was connection. It
Mm.
wasn't that I was traumatized, even though I was. It wasn't that I was addicted to things, even though I was. It was ultimately that I needed to feel connected to the life around me, and I didn't because I was suppressing the emotions that would have allowed me to express my authentic self, my vulnerable self, in a way that opens doors for healthy relationships.
Mm. Right.
Started surrounding myself with the started partying often, had a couple of mental breakdowns, and then I turned 23, and I wanted to throw a party at my house, and um, ultimately all those friends that said that they were going to be there for me, None of them showed. They wanted me
None
to
of them
go out
show.
and hang out with them. After I had just spent the entire day preparing for us to have a party at my place, and
Oh, I'm
suddenly I
sorry, man. That's
recognized
tough.
that. Oh no! I look at it and like I'm completely fine with it. I realized that like that was ultimately the result of my actions. I had chosen to
That's
hang
fair
out with
enough.
people
That's
that
true.
didn't align with my
That's true.
values. You know,
Yeah,
I had
I love one
chosen.
part that you said, just to really chime
Yeah,
in real fast, just like the responsibility part, because so often, of course, it's an easy thing to do to blame others and all that. But then
yeah,
this is one big reason why I really try to share this perspective where it's being very cautious as to who you ask for advice or anything like this. Because if you, like, let's say someone gives you a piece of advice and then you end up taking their advice, it works out well, then the credit is ultimately going to go to them. Like, you pulled the trigger, but for them, they're the one that guided you. Now, if it goes the other way, you ask them for advice and it goes horribly wrong, you're also going to blame them, right? First thing
yeah,
that happened. So in both instances, you're lacking accountability, and regardless, you're not the one who's influencing your fate. And
yeah,
I mean, that's pretty disempowering. So just in this case, like I love how you said that with your friends that were there, and it's like, oh, that's a shame because it never feels great to have a party and then have no one show up. That's really tough. But then to recognize
yeah,
saying, okay, what actions did I take that influenced others? Because if I behaved in a way that was more in alignment, they may be more inclined to, right? It's not changing who you are to match them. It's just, are you really putting your best foot forward? Are you being the Charles you can be, or the Charles you talk about who just pushes people away? And
yeah,
the one
and
who pushed people away who your wife probably wouldn't have been attracted to, but because of this growth you experienced 2 3 years, that's someone she's like, wow, this is, he's not a little boy, he's a man, right? It's like that
yep,
expression, you heal the boy and the man will appear, right?
yes. Oh goodness,
And I
that's so
love that
good.
one, man. I love that. But yes, go.
Yeah.
That just resonates.
Well, so it's so funny you mention how my wife ties in with that because ultimately
Yeah.
she had a list. She had a checkbox list of who
She had
she
a check
wanted to
mark
see in
list.
her husband. She didn't tell
Oh.
me about this though. So we had a ton of disagreements on things such as modesty, um, the language, friend groups, the ways that we lived our lives were completely different. I was a rule breaker. She's a rule follower. Um,
Mm,
and so we've definitely come to really balance each other out as we've taught each other the right way to have a healthy balance
mm.
of what structure with fluidity
Structure with fluidity.
without
Yes.
entering.
Yes.
So
Charles, I lost you again. I lost you again.
um,
If you can say, if you, I lost you again. If you could say the last 5 seconds, that would be great.
said last thing I heard was structure with fluidity. Was that what you got?
Yeah, that was the last thing. Yep.
Okay, yeah, structure with fluidity without codependence. Um,
Mm.
as a way to address a healthy expression of our full selves, each being at 100% ready to enter into interdependence. Um, I was in a place where I had spent my entire life chasing codependent relationships, and I only ever
Oh,
attracted people that were doing the same. You know, I was willing to give
of
them
course.
attention because they kept me on the hook.
Yep.
They made me feel good as long as I made them feel good.
Yeah, and
And
you see how this is
that,
like kind of like a tit for tat relationship, right? It's like kind of
yeah,
the horse trading, and I mean, it's like, look at this though. You didn't go into these, my assumption, with bad intent, and really, I don't believe
yeah,
most people get into any relationship with bad intent. It's just, again, you're running east looking for a sunset, and then we punish people for not having the tools at their disposal, which some things you just are never exposed, right? So it's like that expression. I'm watching a show now called Smallville, and there's one scene where someone is being thrown into a prison or something like that. I mean, it's an amazing show. Like, I take notes on what they do because it's
yeah,
deep. But then one thing it says, not verbatim, is basically like, it's really easy to like punish someone by throwing them to into a cell or something like that. But if you really want to repair someone, like putting in the effort, giving them the tools and the knowledge, like that's really an indicator of you caring, right? Because it's so easy to
yeah,
punish saying, oh, like, look at Charles, these codependent relationships. He was just reckless. Like, he just doesn't care about people. That's so easy. That's the easiest cop out. The easiest cop out to say is, oh, this person's just bad. Oh, this person's just that. it's much harder to come to terms with the idea that circumstances do influence us a lot. Of course, decisions mostly, but that we could be subject to the same kind of behavior if we had similar information and influence in our life.
Yeah,
It's a
absolutely.
big thing, man. I mean, that hits me hard.
Yeah, I think it's the interesting thing is about when it comes to nature and nurture, how
Yeah.
we choose to take information presented to us, and each person, though nature and nurture are about 99% influence, I would say, there's the
Hmm.
1%, which would be us, that makes us different in how we take that information, process it, associate a meaning and a feeling to it, and then make
Right.
decisions in the future either towards it or away from it.
I
And
said, man, I
people
love that.
will,
I love that.
yeah, they'll
I love
people
that.
will have this thing, because I had this. I would say, um, that it's the wind's fault. I would say that it's my parents' fault. I would
Oh yeah,
say
yeah.
that it's this and that person's fault. But ultimately, that was just how I grew up avoiding pain, because that was the
Mm,
pattern that I chose. Was it was from the youngest memory that I have. It was literally,
okay.
hey, son, stop biting your fingernails, or I'm gonna go get the fingernail monster. And so, in my little like 2 or 3 year old brain, I watched my father go out to the backyard, and he called fingernail monster to the sky. And as he does that, I watch this gigantic dinosaur cloud roll up through the sky. And in my 2 or 3 year old little brain, I'm like, this is the end of the world. And
Yeah, yeah.
so
Well, you have no
I
reference. Yeah, no reference.
exactly. And so it was so real to me. But in that
Yeah.
single moment, I disconnected from my true identity, because what I learned was that if I am my truest, most authentic self, that equals pain. So I'm going to be someone that I'm not in order to avoid pain. And that
Wow.
was how I spent
Yep.
my life
Hmm.
until the exact a church opened up. Um, it's the Belonging Co. And what happened was I went there on a Sunday morning after the pandemic, been full of all these traumas, all this damage, this brutalization that I had done to myself and everyone around me, and I just cried my eyes out for 2 hours straight. And then that same day, I put down my 12-year porn addiction. I put down the substance abuse, and I never looked back.
Never look
Um,
back.
and and that was
Oh
nearly
man.
3 years ago now. And people say,
Yo, round of
oh
applause, man.
shoot,
That is incredible. Yeah.
yeah, but people will say, "Oh shoot, I've been struggling with that for a long time, man. Fight the good fight. You're doing good. Keep it going."
Mm,
No, there is no struggle to stay away from it. I don't want it anymore. Literally, it's like it would be like if let's use a very crass example.
sure.
Um, it would be like I had spent my entire life staring at dog poop, and then I start to look away, and I say, "Oh, I really want to look at it again." Like you just don't do that when you suddenly realize that it's dog poop.
Mm,
You had
yeah.
it. Instead, you go and you live your life, and it's such a crass example, but for me, it paints this picture of, if you know what you're doing, rolling around in the mud, stop rolling around in the mud.
Hmm.
I decided I didn't want to live like that anymore. It was time to level up, and I did. And
Wow.
life has never been the same. I got my house. I'm now married to the most amazing woman in the world, and I've got a career that I'm absolutely in love with.
Wow, man. Look at this. I mean, all of that occurs really in, there's a time frame, there's a process, but it really comes down to a certain decision and reaching that threshold of saying, you know what, like the path that's continuing and happening, there's too much pain here that if I continue, it's going to bring me more pain. That the change needs to occur. But then you also had some kind of strategy. For me, that's what I'm sensing. Like you had one, you have the reference, which I think is really important. You attach a certain meaning to those events that occurred in the past and what you want in the present, what it's going to look like in the future. And then you have a decision they decide to ultimately make. You have those 2 hours at the church where it's really a cleanse and an outpouring of bottled up emotions. And like you
Yep.
said, like a pressure cooker. Is that what you said?
I pretty much,
Yeah.
it was a canister of gas.
Oh, okay, canister of gas. Like basically a strong buildup that at
Yep.
some point or another going to burst. Yeah. And
Yeah.
fortunately, though, you were able to be in an environment where that sort of outburst can be kind of nurtured in a way that's like
Yes.
healthy. as opposed to
Yeah,
somewhere else where
absolutely.
you could be punished, and then one of
Hmm.
your buddies could say, you know what, I'm going to go in the backyard and I'm going to call the nail biting monster to come over and spank you. I don't know, something weird.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
could have happened. And then you're going to associate, oh my gosh, showing emotion, demonstrating pain, trying to have a cleanse with this potentially triggering in a way incident. Because like when you were younger, I mean, I don't know if it was traumatic, but it really left an imprint on you. And
yeah,
even 20 years later, 2 decades, you can still reference a memory from before the time that most young children actually gain consciousness.
yeah,
That's how
absolutely.
ingrained it was for yourself.
And it's so funny because the story continued on from there. But ultimately, I I realized, I solved an immediate pain, but there was still baggage attached to it, and that
Oh,
baggage was continued destructive habits that even though they weren't, uh, even though they weren't substances, even though they weren't, even though it wasn't porn, even though it wasn't food, they were still all over me. It was interesting because my entire life was spent. I hated everything about my life, and so I had to make a ton of changes. But I didn't really come to that realization until I started to notice this larger pattern of the fact that I had quit college, I had quit working at Subway when I was 17. I started my company for music, film, photography, live events. I ran that for 3 years. Um, and in that process, that was where I discovered drugs. That was where I discovered um, true heartbreak, and then
when
continued
you're
to
saying
just repeat
heartbreak,
it.
because I do want to explore that just
Yeah.
as like as a footnote, but heartbreak like from an event with like people you're really close with, was it like a girlfriend, something like that? Because those are
So
like the lessons that you can really extrapolate from a
absolutely,
electrocution
yeah.
moment.
So there's a couple of different kinds of heartbreak, because we all search for emotional outcomes in a ton of different ways. One would be
Hmm.
through relational love, other sorts, acceptance. And so for me, a lot of it did have to circle. A lot of it circled around relational love, um, where I had it as part of the codependent pattern that I had followed out in my entire life. It was directly related to this beginning incident when I was maybe 4 or 5, where I was my mom dropped me off at a Sunday school daycare while she went to the choir, and I didn't know that she left me, and I proceeded to cry my eyes out. Apparently, it's my thing. But I did that for about an hour, and I wouldn't
Wow.
let anybody comfort me. I wouldn't play with any of the other kids. And so from there, I was maybe 7 or 8 by the time I had my first girlfriend, and I continued to ask girls out and get rejected or just be in codependent relationships literally for the entire course of my life up until I discovered porn um, when I was maybe 12 or 13. Cheated on my girlfriend because it just, and literally, like, who does that when you're 12 or 13? You're supposed to
Yeah, it's
be,
such kind of a form of
having
conflict
fun.
even at that age. Yeah, right. It's true.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those things where for me, I was like, I'm going to do what I want. Nobody loves me. I'm a little 12, 13 year old.
Hmm.
So I'm going to go find these emotional fulfillments in the only place that I know where to seek them. And that is in a relationship, because that was what was portrayed to me at a young age, was that um, um, mom and dad are great. We model our lives from until we find different models.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
learned to find a woman. And so I fired life, then discovered porn, and that's making getting in relationships a lot more difficult. Um, so by then, I had been kicked out of a ton of places. I had just social groups. I didn't fit in with anyone. I
Mm.
had gotten rejected 100,000 times by women, and so I start my company, and then the patterns start to pop up again in business. Who would have known?
Yeah, man, it
because
permeates in all the areas of your life, right? I mean, as much as you may try to
exactly.
separate them, but they'll permeate. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I would run into situations where some of my clients would give me feedback, and I wouldn't like the feedback, and I would start to just let them have it. Like, hey, I'm working my butt off for you. Who are you to tell me, like, the quality of my work? And ultimately, that was a big downfall because I wasn't able to see past my own pride. Um,
Hmm.
and so, I moved to Nashville, and then it happens again, and I start getting feedback on my sales gig, where I think my boss said, no, I don't think, I know, my boss said this one thing that hurt more than anything. It
Oh no,
was, we usually don't hire people from off the street. and,
they
and
said
I
that to
mean,
you.
yeah, and I had sold them over $10 million in revenue by that point.
Oh,
And so that was a really difficult thing to hear because I had fought and clawed and been told that I'm going to be the next young successful CEO multiple times. So for him to say that to me was really humbling, and I hated him for a long time. And I realized actually he was probably the best boss I ever had because he was the
wow. We know now. Why is
great.
that though, right?
All
Now,
every
because like everyone else to a certain
yeah
extent, not that they're propping you up, but because they're helping to support this identity that you have around yourself, right? And then someone
yep
like that, like, do we ever really hate the messenger, or is it more so the message that we just don't align with? And then to have an easy scapegoat, because the message usually ties deeper with who we are and what we're trying to avoid. Now,
yeah
why not blame the person who brought it? Because it seems like more of uh, an intentional weapon from someone being used on us, as opposed
yeah
to this really universal kind of truth, this objective, real truth that's like Charles, boom. And then you don't want to hear it. But to that point, man, I mean, who do we blame in that moment, and how much of your identity is layered into that?
that's and that is what was so powerful about it was I felt like my identity was being attacked. It
Yeah,
was
man.
everything that I
Yeah,
had,
yeah.
because
Yes, yes, yes.
and, so when I moved to Nashville, I had nothing. I had no body. I had no money even. I had um, I had my first couple of months of rent paid for. Really thankful to my dad for that. He really helped
Mm.
me get started. But then I started living paycheck to paycheck as I started working my way up the ladder. And so work was all I knew. I got there early. I stayed late. I went home and studied. I would spend night after night after night downloading more information, just learning and learning all I could. I wanted to be the best, and I knew that it was either sink or swim. So we're gonna swim, and that was for me. That was a way that I coped with my loneliness, was just pouring myself into the one area where I could experience the most possible success ever. Now I still dealt with all these problems in the background, um, but when it came to my work, I was literally there. I was there more than anyone else, and so hearing that made me think: does he not see the hard work that I'm putting in? Does he not see how much effort I'm putting in? Does he not see the results that I'm struggling to put out right now because I'm giving it my all? But I was blaming my account set. I was blaming the state that they gave me. I was blaming my customers for not
Hmm.
buying enough. I wasn't at me. I was blaming my teammates for not doing their jobs well enough, which they weren't. But ultimately, I was allowing my failures to be pinned on them as a way to avoid receiving any pain for ultimately the decisions that I made that put me in that terrible situation to begin with,
Wow,
um,
wow.
which was my inability to take feedback and really learn from it and grow from it. And I actually read a book. Um, we might have talked about this in India. It was Extreme Ownership, and that
Does it have
was,
like a yellow and red cover at all? Or
I
no,
think so.
or maybe that's
Um,
like a Navy SEAL book, but something like this. It's like, okay,
yeah.
I'm gonna check
So
it fast. Yes, keep going.
Extreme Ownership taught me about personal responsibility. It taught me how
Mhm.
everything in my life is my fault, and that's a good thing because then I can change it. Because if I blame the
It's like we
wind, I
were
can't
talking
change it.
about. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
we were talking about the point, and yeah, like you're not becoming dependent. Yeah, I was wrong about the color of the book, but it's with how U.S. Navy SEALs lead and win by Jocko
Yep.
Willink and Leif Badman. So yeah,
Yep.
it's a good one from what I've seen.
Yeah. And that really showed me ultimately that it doesn't matter what happens in your life. It's about how you're going to choose to respond to
Yeah.
whatever it is that is thrown at you. And
Mm.
thus began my journey towards personal development. After that, I discovered High Performance Habits by Brennan
Yeah.
Burchard.
Okay. Yeah.
That book was incredible. Taught me how to visualize my end results. Taught me really how to conjure up the energy that I needed um, to reach the outcomes of life that I wanted. And ultimately, it unlocked this entire new realm of possibility for me because I was still going through all my problems. Um, but now I had some new tools in my tool belt that I didn't know existed before. And so that became
Mm.
a real game changer. So basically how this ends is I get set free from all these problems, and from there I excel. I excel at work.
Mm.
So training people, by
Oh
by
wow.
that my career there had ended, I had trained
Yeah.
over 2,000 people. And
Wow.
these are people which, by the way, I have 18 credit hours to my name. I was training people with full on business degrees. I was training people 2 or 3 times my age how to do what I did. I was teaching people sales. I was teaching people technology. I was teaching them how to really close their business and win at the highest levels, with speed, with productivity, because we spend so much of our time doing tasks that don't produce the results that we desire.
Mm.
And it was this way that I was able to build connectivity with others because I didn't have anything else at that point. Um, the people that I had surrounded myself, I started looking for more high performers. I started looking for more people that wanted to better their lives, and we're buying books on investing and buying books on personal growth rather than people that are spending their paychecks buying beer on the weekends.
Oh, dude, that one I resonate with because if you think about it, I just saw something about this on an account where it's like, let's say you spend $15 on a book, and that's like a pretty expensive development book, but let's just say 12 books or something like that. That gives you the ability to have a conversation in a way or have like a mentor with someone who's basically condensed decades worth of experience, pain, pleasure into this little or large book. Even let's say if it's 400 pages, you can do it in 10 hours, something like that. And you're getting all of that for the price of $12. And people will decide instead of making that really investment, that's probably the best ROI in history, really, that it's that cheap. But instead, yeah, go $12 or go buy something that's just so ephemeral and it loses its value. And nothing wrong with dabbling with these areas. Just if you always say, "Hey, I'm not growing, I'm not developing," but you're constantly investing or wasting your money and really your time and your energy on stuff like that, then how can you complain about the results you're not getting? And if look, you go from younger Charles and all these troubles to influencing over 2,000 people that you can train. I think that's what you said, 2,000 people, and
Yep.
working with these business magnets. And I'm method to the madness, but also there's a trail that you're leaving. So I think this is really important for people who are listening to understand that there's a process and it is methodical. It doesn't have to be super complicated. And maybe you can speak to that because I think that's a big barrier to entry for people who maybe have the know-how. They understand it in theory, but the practice and the action of doing it is where they get stuck. So how would you maybe look at it from your experience to kind of help them make that little 2 millimeter shift that can be an accelerant for them?
So let's look at it like this. I did not start out training 2,000 people. I started out training one in my off time. I started using my lunch break to train one person, and he's still a good friend to this day. He's incredible, and he really loved it. So he kept coming back. He kept asking for more. He said, "You know what? You're about 10, 12 years younger than me, but you have I would like to learn. So I'll teach you what I know. You teach me what I know." And we just continued this
Well,
process over time. And then I started inviting more people to the class and more people to the class. And then the pandemic hits, and then up to like 50 or 60 people on my call for weeks.
Wow.
After I had been training them for a little bit, I get a call saying, "Hey, that's not what I hired for. Please stop." So
what?
okay,
Oh
and
my
I had
goodness.
two options there. Old
Wow.
me would have said, "You know what? The world is against me. Everyone hates me. They don't
Yep.
see me succeed. They want to keep me down. They're not trying to lift me up and empower me." But what new me at that point said was, "You know what? You're right." And I went on my
Mm.
way. And I continued to just help people and do my best every single day. And that opened up more doors for opportunity to do this at a higher level, because I started networking with more people, and those people were more high performers, such as myself. I started becoming the person that I wanted to find in others.
Mm.
And it was that natural magnetic attraction to others where um, they started asking me, "Hey, can you teach my class of 200 new hires? Hey, can you teach my class of 50 new hires?" Um, and so these consistent were popping up. And then I started getting promoted, and then I started handling $20 million quotas, and then I started handling 30 million, and then 37, and it just kept going. And by the time I had excelled to this point, it was really just that I decided, you know what? The only way that I'm going to be able to get what I really want is not by brute forcing and being a lone wolf. It's by really having a deep connection to everyone around me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
They
the
have
more
these
that I
theories
continued,
too.
the more I got.
Hmm. No, yeah, sorry. I interrupted because there was a lag. But finish that point.
So what happened ultimately was that I was playing this game as a lone wolf, but when
Hmm.
I started playing it as a team sport, even if I wasn't money off of helping other people with their problems, I learned the true value of having a community around me to support me, lift me up, build me, give me opportunities. And the more that I gave to them, the more they gave to me.
Hmm.
And that was where opportunities started opening up to work with the coaches, to work with these other leaders and directors, working with people in Canada that needed to ask me how I was running my business in a very strategic way. Um, and all these opportunities popped up because I went from saying the world is against me to what can I do to give back to those who have given so much to me.
Hmm.
And that was how it all started, with one person. And how much am I willing to give, you know? Um,
Okay.
because
So
he didn't need to go there.
yeah, that's true too. I mean, so you're saying that it's going from not going to, I mean, really any kind of a relationship, thinking what can you get versus what can you give, and it doesn't necessarily matter scale; it matters more impact. But also, it could be a million people, it could be one person. I mean, you're making that marginal progress, but that one person, how many years has it been? How's your relationship? Improve the quality of their life, and vice versa. They also showed you what worked, what didn't work, and gave you either that confidence or humbled you to understand what needs to be done in order to continue with it.
Yeah, yeah,
Cool.
that's really it. Um,
That's beautiful, man. Yeah.
so one of the most interesting things that happened over the course of this change was I started to recognize a couple of things that really stood out to me. Some of these larger patterns. One was that was going to be, um, an inventor,
Hmm.
and then I thought I was going to be a model, and then an actor, and
With that
then
hair, man, you
I
can
grew up
do it. With
think,
that hair, you
yeah,
got some awesome hair there.
exactly. Um, I managed to book a couple of things, but nothing major,
Yeah, I mean, it's like, dude,
Um,
like that's a career you can have until you're like chilling forever. Like
yeah,
it's never too late. Just don't cut the hair. Don't cut the hair.
yeah,
Don't do
exactly.
it. Don't do it. Don't
Um,
do it.
so I thought, hey, maybe I'll be a rock star. Maybe
Yeah.
I'll be a CEO of the universe, or maybe I'll be the next Bill Gates or Elon Musk. And I kept
Hmm.
on chasing after these things that I wanted to define me, rather than me build this life of authenticity so that I could truly accept myself for who I am and where I'm at. And even though I learned a lot of rules for internal and external strategies for success, I still wasn't happy with my life. Um,
Yeah.
and nothing really changed until I was married. In fact, it was after I was married that I started to really dive in and ask the question of, like, why do I live in the past still? Why do I always look to the future, but why am I never present?
Oh,
Um, you
that's
know,
nice right there. I like that.
that
Well,
was the big
what's
question.
yeah, were you able to navigate and find a resolution to this? Because it's also, yeah, I mean, the past like could be painful, but I mean, past, yeah, we fixate it. It could be painful, but we know what's kind of in the past, right? We're aware it's like an anchor for our experience, and it really supports and explains our identity, our behaviors, all these things. Similar
Yeah,
with the future, like the future can be very promising, but it's also not like none of them are tangible, but it's not a current present thing. But then these are a little more comfortable than the present because you have to come to terms with reality. And I don't know, man. I mean, it's more challenging now, I think, because of course all the distractions and even to go way back in the conversation with when you were talking about like porn and stuff like that, is that it literally creates kind of this alternate universe. Of course, it distorts reality, but it takes you away from all the pain in your past. It takes away all of the pain you may experience in the future, or it can even enhance the pleasure you think you'll have in the future by bringing it to the immediate, right?
yeah.
So it distorts all of it. But yeah, so how do you like how do you manage to kind of find like the middle between that to be present and avoid the other two?
So a lot of it, in fact, I think we could probably agree on all of our external reality is merely a reflection of our internal processes. All of
Hmm.
those internal beliefs that drive our actions to further refine and condition our internal beliefs. Once again, the vicious cycle. Um, but those internal beliefs can either create a beautiful future or lead you to a future of destruction. Um,
Creation or destruction, like you were mentioning earlier.
there you
Yeah,
go. And
yeah.
that was really where I started to look at these areas where I was sitting on the fence. And I started there and I asked, what am I not taking action on and why?
Hmm.
And so some folks might be asking right now, well, what does this have to do with being present? And it was that I was so afraid to be present. I was afraid to acknowledge perceived pain because my patterns that I had built taught me to avoid pain. And so you don't really want to be where pain is. Even if you're the strongest person in the world, you don't want to be where pain is all the time. Now, provided there's ways to see how pain can help in some cases, but until you've got to a place where you're mentally and emotionally refined in that kind of way to understand the difference between real pain and perceived pain, they look the exact same.
Yes,
And
that's
so
true. That's true.
I had to be able to recognize that I had some healing that really needed to be done, um, so that I could really learn to love myself where I'm at. Because I predominantly I'm a Christian. I believe
Hmm.
Jesus is the only way to eternal life, and so I follow everything that the Bible teaches. And though I'm not a perfect practicing Christian, um, I believe that it comes down to a lot of basic principles. One of them would be the greatest commandment above all else, which is love God and love others as yourself.
Hmm.
And so that ties into being present for me in a way that it's really simple. You cannot love someone more than you love yourself. So if you love
Oh
yourself
wait, you gotta
little,
say
or
that
if
again. You gotta say that again. That's really deep. Say that again.
yeah, you cannot you literally do not have the ability to love someone more than you love yourself. If you do, it's a lie.
Hmm.
That's compromise, because then you may you may be dying inside, you may be dying outside. And sure, sacrifice is good, because sacrifice is giving something up of a lesser value for that of a greater value. But compromise is where you're giving up something of a greater value for that of a lesser value. So
Oof,
when you allow
that's
yourself
great.
to conform to the patterns of those around you, you then become influenced. You become you have no responsibility for your actions. So by loving yourself first and having this level of self worth that permeates the energy in the room around you, you have the ability to influence and lead and direct and guide and orchestrate people to the best outcomes, to loving each other. And really, it's just about taking our personal responsibility and saying, I'm going to choose to carve my path. And if others follow, that's awesome. But I'm not going to let them shake me from my mission. It's
Yeah.
about I needed my mission. And so all that
Mm.
ties in because I didn't love myself enough to acknowledge that I had a mission for my one life on Earth. And until you have your mission in place, it becomes really difficult to be present because you don't really know where to start. You keep your head
Oof.
down and you start,
Mm.
trudging along, hoping that you're going to reach this destination in the end. But ultimately, that destination is one that you're holding on to a string of hope that that you're going to end up there, and you have no idea, you have no strategy in place. You may have some form of tool in your tool belt that you can maybe get an edge over everyone else trying to get the same things. But ultimately, if you're not being who you need to be, you will not be the person that you're called to be, uh, to to be ready for the opportunities that present themselves for
Mm.
you to, if you're not being you when you need to be you, when the opportunity presents itself for
Oh yeah.
growth,
Yep.
you won't be ready because you haven't been practicing for that person
Yeah.
that you're supposed to become. So I had to ask myself on my last day on Earth, will I have done everything that I needed to do to become who I needed to be, to serve the world in a greater way, to love those around me and love them well? And it was in
Now,
that moment that everything clicked.
now, why the urgency though, right? Why not wait another 10, 15, 20 years? Because of course there's been pain, but if life
Yeah.
is quote unquote long enough, why the urgency or the desire to really have this thought process now and act on it?
So this is where I believe I'm super blessed. Because by this point, you and I have talked about it. We use accelerated strategies. That's one of my X factors. Is that I don't preach theory, I preach practice. I preach strategy. Um, um, and a lot of it comes from condensing decades down into days.
I love that. Yeah.
Um, and one of the areas where I believe that I'm most blessed is when people ask, "How old are you?" I'll say, "Oh, I'm this old. I'm that old." They'll be like, "Oh, you're a baby. You have so much time," and I'm like, I'm sorry, just because you spent the last 20 years partying does not mean that I have time. It means that
Mm.
you're trying to validate that you still have time.
I never looked at it like that. Huh.
Because it's all about the association. He puts out what associates to their internal identity.
Oh,
So if
yeah,
you tell me I
100%.
still have
Yeah.
time, you know, they're not telling me that I have time. They're trying to reaffirm that they didn't make the wrong decision.
Right, right. Oof, oof. Yeah. I mean, it's, it sounds a little like cognitive dissonance in a way, but it's also
Yeah.
trying to, yeah, like they're exerting something to help remain consistent with the identity they have within themselves. Right. I mean, a couple of things though. I love the point with the age because I mean, one, yeah, like, gosh, people say this is actually a little segue, but oh, how long have you been dating? Like, how long have you been together? For me, like, I never really asked that question because I mean I will, but I'll never ask that question without asking after saying, okay, how long does it feel like you've been together? Because you can be with someone for 10 years and not even really know who their family is or anything
Yeah.
really like authentic about them because you have that show. And then vice versa, you know someone for 2, 3 months, like you and your wife, right? You said you moved in
Hmm.
like that and you got engaged and married, things like this. But the joke I want to put in there is when people ask about the age and a little different. If you meet someone who's older or something, they go like, "Oh, I'm 70 or something," and people go, "Oh, wow, you look really great for your age." And there's a comedian that jokes about it because he goes, "You know what? I never like when people say that, because if I was 25 years old and I walked in here and looking like this, you would be like, "Oh my gosh, were you in a fire?" You know. So it's just sort of like a whole like interpretive approach to someone's age and stuff like that, and seeing how it varies. Like the people you're working with 20 years ahead, look at how they're projecting. Look at how they're seeing it so differently. And it is. I do like to emphasize a lot of times that the outcomes of not just our lives, but even any interaction we have, any occurrence, right? At times it may not
Yeah.
really be your fault, but it does come down to it being your responsibility to change it or to find a way to make it better.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, and it's interesting. I've run into this so many times now, because practically everything that we all live day to day, but it's about the way that we choose our actions. And I say I run into this all the time because it's everything. It's
Yeah.
everywhere. It's everything that we do. It's about actions that further define our beliefs. But people will say, well, hey, I can make an action that doesn't define my belief. Um, but that's really not true, because everything we
Well, yeah,
do,
how that doesn't make any
um,
sense, right? Because every action you
it,
take, it's in alignment, or it's like with your true desire, like the act you're going to
yeah,
make, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, this makes sense.
And so it's this simple idea that, I'm trying to think of a good example that's happened recently. Um, but let's use an example of this friend I have. He's going through a really really rough time right now, um, and when when he reaches out for help, to one of these group chats that we've got, and um, he gets a response that says, "Hey, that's really not the purpose of the group chat. We do love you. We care about you dearly. We do want you to get your healing, man. Go live your best life." But the internal representation of what was said is that he's unloved, he's not enough, he's not
That's literally how
welcome.
I interpreted that. Yeah, that's exactly
Yeah,
how. I mean, wow, wow. Like someone's pouring out their heart, and what if that's the only outlet that they have, that they feel comfortable
exactly.
enough? And it's not like necessarily the burden isn't on you guys to have the answers, but I do think the opportunity is there for you, for anyone in that situation. Because a buddy of mine had friends with it was the same thing, to pick up the mantle of responsibility and just be present. Because,
Yeah,
dude, I mean, you could be that one outlet that someone is looking for, right? That last opportunity before they say, you know what, the group chat doesn't vibe with me. Let me just drive to the middle of nowhere off a bridge and see what happens. Seriously.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, and that's absolutely it. I mean, I believe that every single one of us, we're called to be there for each other. We're called to love each other. We're called to live lives of service. And for everyone, that looks different. You can be a servant leader. You don't have to just
Yeah.
be a servant in the middle of Africa.
Well, I
But
wish I knew that before I moved to Africa and did that. I'm very happy I went. Just, yeah, I
yeah.
mean, it's the whole expression, like even travel, right? Any of these
Hmm.
other areas that you need to go so far and wide to find these things. And yeah, I mean, there are different variables that you'll get, let's say in Paris, or let's say in, I don't want to, that's such a simple example, like Zagreb in Croatia, or,
Yeah.
somewhere in like Ghana or any other country really, in Asia, anything like this, that you don't always need to travel so far from where you're currently at to have that adventure, to find that love, to find beauty, right? I have my two podcast episodes before this, actually. It's called Missing Beauty. And just a quick little plug for it is that they had a world class violinist who was the day before playing at like this big theater in front of thousands of people. And he's like one of the best in the world playing this violin. The next day, he goes into a subway station here in DC. I mean, maybe like a mile from where I live over here. And he's there playing. No one recognized him on the subway. And they're so in a rush to get to what they want to go to that they're missing what's going on. And of course, there's responsibility that the adults have to be places on time. I understand that. But what was really striking was it was the younger children that were the ones who were able to stop. Because at that point, like for me, it's you're able to recognize beauty in a much simpler way. But look at where their focus was. That some people go so far and wide to find something that is really just present in front of them if they're open enough and willing enough to connect with something like that, something
Yeah.
sublime in a way. And like the buddy and your friend and all the beauty that they miss, it's unfortunate.
And that's you really hit it on the head. It starts with who's in your backyard.
Oh,
Hopefully not literally,
hold
um
on. I think there's
but
someone in my backyard
if
now. Hold on. Wait. No, just kidding.
of why are, it's one of those things where it just comes to what are you doing to show love to your neighbor?
Oh,
um I mean, even right now I have a neighbor that she's screaming on the phone at 3 a.m. every single night out in the front yard.
oh,
And
that's not bad.
like it's just one of those things where, like, sure, I don't have to tolerate that, but how often would someone in my position look and say, my goodness, she sounds like she's going through a really tough time right now.
Oh man.
You
Yeah.
know
Wow.
let's give
Wow.
her some grace. you
Yeah.
know and it's just this whole thing of, like, people have shown me a lot of grace. There were a lot of times where I got kicked out of when I was younger, and I would have looked and said that, they hate me, nobody likes me. But if I then go and repeat those cycles to other people and, give them the same result, what kind of good am I putting out into the world? What kind of love am I putting out there? What kind of example am I setting for those that are around me? And
And look
I'm
what,
called.
yeah,
Good.
well, and just look at what you're doing in that moment. You chose to get better, not
Yeah.
bitter.
Yeah.
Right? How often does
Wow.
something like that happen and you decide to get really bitter versus getting better? Because I mean, honestly, if you really want to look at a point of, I'm not encouraging revenge by any means, but isn't really the best revenge, if you're going to go down this route, to treat someone better than they treated you,
Yeah.
especially if they treated you poorly? So for all, like, maybe the sadists out there, people who are going to go down that route, like, the kindness doesn't hurt. But then again, like, how much more, like, just think about it like this: how did it feel for you to be in that position when they were not showing you grace or something like that? And if it really hurt bad enough, that's when you have a decision, right? It's like the classic story of, like, the wolf you feed, or there's the two children with the drunk father. One of them becomes an
Mm.
alcoholic, the other one doesn't. What what path are you going to follow in that instance? And why would you want to hurt someone, or even someone who's innocent, right? Because just look, that was you. That's who you were previously.
Yeah.
The person who
Yeah.
wasn't shown grace, the person who didn't have the tools at the time, and then maybe had to manage, maybe had to use drugs or alcohol or porn or just
Hmm.
destructive behaviors and patterns that affected the ones they care about. Like, do you really want that for a stranger who doesn't even know
Yeah.
better? Like, that's crazy.
Yeah. You know.
That's not love.
So that really comes down to the root of what I believe my mission is now. My
Oh,
life
yeah.
consists of living this transformed life where I have new freedom and a second chance. My life is about having a second chance. It's about having a real spiritual connection to God. It's about having a um, a heightened emotional awareness about myself and the
Mhm.
world around me. It's about having unlimited energy, and about living passionately. And I'm throwing out a couple of big words there because that's really
I
that's
like
the
big
only way
words.
to
I like
define
big
it.
words. Do it. Do it.
Um,
I like them.
I what kind of experiences are we making in the world? One that I remember you and I talked about when we had just finished the wedding in India. Was I had talked about my goal was to set this example um, of this quote that I read from one of Tim Ferriss's books, talking about, most people are living very mundane, monotonous lives. We got to go and create rich experiences,
Which
create
book is this?
rich. I think this is in 4 Hour Work Week. You create rich, meaningful experiences out of life,
Uh-huh.
and that was where I had really been at the time. Was there's your copy,
I
man. I
actually
just
just
gave
bought it
mine
a
away.
couple days ago. Yeah, I just because, dude, I mean, I'm really, like, yeah, there's a lot more potential that I got to leverage and capitalize. So I've known about
Yeah.
this book for ages, and I'm like, what, dude, yeah, I got to start making these moves. But I'm very excited to read this. But please continue because, yeah, it's
So
exciting.
I'll give you a little update for the book.
Okay.
He talks about um, some methods for passive income in there that are related to mail and testing using like direct mail or something like that. It's been a little while since I read it. You can kind of update that on your own to talk about because he talks about magazine advertising, but obviously for us now in the digital age,
Of
that
course.
would be
Yeah,
more
yeah.
centered around digital ads and things like that. So when you
Mm,
read that part, think about that in an updated fashion. It
I
took me
will.
a second to really connect those dots.
Mm, okay. No, no, I mean that's really
Yeah.
spot on. Like finding the way to, because it's finding a way to how you can be intentional, use what you've learned, and try to incorporate it, right? And it's a shame, man, that really all this can begin though. Like even if we're going to talk business, talk relationships, what I've noticed for myself that's been helpful, and maybe you can attest to the same or even different, is I was able to get to certain points where I wouldn't mind any conversation with somebody or any how intense someone was being or anything like that, because I've found a way to provide myself not just with the positivity and the mindset, but the tools
Mm,
as well to complement that. Right? It's like
yeah.
finding that balance between being warm enough to connect, but competent enough to serve and to just
Mm,
really be of value. And when you combine those two, I think you really have a recipe for not just being this charismatic person, but someone who can really provide value in any instance. And
mm,
that, for me, needs to be a prereq before you get into any kind of business, even before you work for a company, before you begin a relationship. Any new venture is going to require you to increase your skills, be at a certain level, but then also commit to the never-ending process of self-development, growth, and tools, skill sets, mindsets, knowledge. It's all a culmination that never ends. And for yourself, and you got really rich experience because you were doing it literally with people at such a large number, and a lot of this was condensed within a what 2, 3, 4 year period that you did that.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
insane.
That's half a decade of condensed experiences.
Yeah, man. I mean, you're literally compressing half a decade into, I'll say, hours, because the
Yeah.
decades into days. You're doing half a decade into hours.
There you go. Yeah.
It's powerful,
So
man.
it's funny that we're actually on 4 hour work week now because that was the book that really convinced me that it's time to start building a life that is in alignment with my real values.
Mm.
That was the one that convinced me because Tim does a great job of walking you through the questions in there that you would need to ask yourself to come up with answers to what is keeping you from living that best life. And um, I'll give a little preview because I love this book so much.
Dude, I mean,
He's
if this book has helped you like the way it
Yeah,
has, I mean, I'm very open minded. I'm really trying to have this be an accelerant.
yeah,
I will, yeah, let's just say by right, I'm 26. By the age of 30, I definitely want to have like the design of that life, where not
yeah,
just about making impact, but you can literally live life on your terms and all these things. Because I know it's a process, and I'm not. It's fine that it's happened overnight, but it's a testament to the investment you need to put that I'm fully behind. So like,
yeah.
give it here, share it because it's crucial.
So this is a little bit of this is a nugget for everyone listening. This
Oh,
is
I love it.
so to condense down what he's saying. It's about what is that perfect life you want to live. Go and plan it out down to the dollar, down to
Oh,
the penny,
I love it.
and then
Oh, the penny.
you spread it out. I mean, you could. I mean, it really
Yeah,
just
I
it
mean,
gives you a
I
much
feel it.
clearer
Yeah,
picture. But what
right.
I literally did was I followed his advice, and I grabbed links of these $1 million things that I wanted in my life, and I created this huge list of what the expenses would be like, and then I spread it across 12 months. And he helped me understand what my 12 months, what my monthly income needs to look like. Um, in order to live that lifestyle. And then he walks you through a couple of questions of, well, what's stopping you from living that life? And then once he walks you through, hey, what's stopping you? It's, hey, let's say you actually like go after this and you try it. I want you to imagine the worst possible nightmare of a situation where you go after it and you fail miserably. What is the worst that could happen? And now I want you to build a recovery plan.
Ooh,
Um,
I
and
love
you
it.
know how many of us
That's
actually
awesome.
like? I got so excited when I walked through that because I was like, "Holy crap! This isn't even a nightmare." You know, if that's the worst that I can think of, and that means that nobody really have is undefined expectations of future pain that they're allowing to prevent them
Ooh,
from entering into the
oh my
life they
gosh, man,
desire the most. Because
that's incredible. So no,
if they
yeah,
acknowledge the pain, it requires them to take personal responsibility.
ooh, man, I'm gonna definitely have to listen to that part again when you talk about redefining the nightmare, right? Because it's like kind of like it's the lack of preparation and really defining what that would look like, the pain. Yeah, man. I mean, it definitely from that perspective, for me, it is of course how you're interpreting it and the perception, but it's also the framework, right? Because a lot of times
Yeah,
you, like he says, like you just said, right? Make that plan that you want, and then if it fails, okay, then what's the recovery plan, right?
yeah,
So it's like kind of having that backup, which it's like that expression: if you want to take the island, you got to burn your boats. I do agree with that. At the same time, having
yep,
a framework like that you've adopted for the past couple of years, however many, you are really being more strategic instead of theory and putting it into action and then seeing what follows from that.
yeah. So I'll even say this for folks that may say the glass is half empty. It's still half full of air. You know,
Jeez, man,
literally
this
you can
you don't
always
stop.
frame things in
You don't stop,
abundance.
man.
Yeah,
That's true. That's true. And there's a glass. I mean, that's a piece of you can do stuff with that,
I like
right?
that.
There's a
I
glass
like
too. I
that.
mean, it's not cutting anybody. No one's bleeding from holding it.
Yeah,
No one ever thinks of that. Where did this
you
object
know.
come from? This object could have been broken and shattered into a million pieces, but it's not.
Wow.
It's solid. There's potential there.
Yeah, there's opportunity.
Yeah, man, dude, I love this, man. I love this. Man, we are coming to the near of the hour, so I think we want to throw a couple just key things I'd
Let's
want
do
to
it.
get from you, just to hear in. Let's see, because you put in the nugget of wisdom, which it's funny because that's how I usually conclude any of the recordings. Just like, oh, what's the nugget of wisdom? So you beat me to it, just
Okay.
intuitively. That's quite nice. Um, we mentioned a couple books, right? The Navy SEAL one, 4 Hour Work Week. Bum, bum, bum. Okay, that's. I'm looking here because I do have someone I'd like to ask. Okay, what would be one if you were able to meet someone in history or current, but preferably in history, like they're deceased, that you would be able to spend, let's say, up to 3 hours with, just talking and just learning and just diving into theory. Um, I actually do have a guess of who it may be, but feel free to say whoever you want. Who would that person be, and what would you really like to be able to leave the conversation with?
Hmm.
And you can take like 20 seconds if you want, not too much time.
So actually, I had an answer, but now I have a better answer.
Oh, okay.
I would really like to meet Viktor Frankl.
Ah, yeah, okay.
Um, when I was going through my roughest patch in life, um, reading um, reading his book, which now the name escapes me.
Man,
Um,
search for meaning. Man, search
Man's
for
Search
meaning.
for Meaning. There you go.
Yeah. I
That
have
was
it
the
here, so
book.
that's why I saw it. Yeah.
There it is. Yeah. So that was the book that helped me learn how to seek out the best in every situation because um, until you're in that moment where you've given up, you like he he was talking to the moon hoping that his wife was listening on the other end and she
Jesus,
was
man.
already dead,
Jeez.
but it
Yeah,
was
I
what
forgot about
got
that.
him through that, you know, and
Oh,
he continued to write his book after the um after the war had ended. um
wow.
and
Wow.
the other most powerful moment from that book was about how there was this truck that had loaded everyone up to escape on, and it was him and one other person that they didn't manage to make it on the truck, and so they started freaking out. And what they found later was that truck actually got taken to a home that they locked everyone inside and burned everyone alive. He survived every possible odds, and he had to keep like he had to willfully conjure up positivity and hope and joy in
Mm,
his life in order to make it through these events and still find meaning after his entire world was destroyed.
right,
And
right.
that for me was what I really related to when I was walking through what is even the point of being alive. And so I would really
Yeah.
love uh, to to talk with him about just some of his experiences and get more granular with the detail of like, you know, what were some of the dark, and like I really want to dig into what that nitty gritty emotional standpoint looks like, because we all I think we can agree at this day and age that even the most logical decisions are based off of emotion.
Oh yeah, that's
So
a
like,
very. It's like Hume talks about that or something, where it's like the
yeah,
passions come first and the reason second, things like that. Um, a point with what you were saying before, how they were going to get on the truck or something like that, and they didn't get in. I mean, it's like that old Western song, I believe, where it goes, "Thank God for unanswered prayers," right?
mm,
It's like we really want this, and it even reminds me of
yeah,
there's a Chinese fable. Well, it's popular. It's attributed to being a Chinese fable, and it talks about there's a farmer and his son. They live in this town, and maybe you've heard of this, but there's a farmer and his son living in this town, and the they have like the ranch and all that, and one of the horses leaves, and then the neighbor
mm,
goes to the farmer and says, "Oh my goodness, your horse left. That's terrible." And the farmer goes, "Well, maybe." And then the next day, the horse comes back with two other horses. The two more horses. Your horse get back. Wow. The farmer goes, "Isn't that amazing?" The farmer goes, "Maybe." And then the next day, the farmer's son gets on one of the horses, is playing, falls, and the poor boy breaks his leg. Crying and just a
mm,
big scene. And then the neighbor goes, "Oh my goodness, your boy broke his leg. Oh, it's terrible, isn't it?" And the farmer goes, "Maybe." And then the next day, a war starts in the nearby vicinity, and the military comes and they're enlisting everyone who's of age, and he's of age. But the military comes by and says, "Okay, we need everyone to enlist," but sees that the farmer's boy has a broken leg. So then he doesn't have to enlist. And the neighbor goes by and goes, "Oh my gosh, your son, he avoided the draft. That's amazing. Like, isn't that?" And then the farmer goes, "Maybe." So it's just like it's kind of that like sort of endless loop. Of course, there are things that we prefer to happen, but even in that, like, of course, it's great that he wasn't put on that truck, right? Of course, my God, who would? No one would ever disagree with this. So a lot of times, what we think that like what we pray for that doesn't get answered could actually be the best thing that ever happened. And at the same time, it's like our worst day can really be our best day if we find a deep enough meaning inside of it. And I
yeah,
think it's the beauty of what Viktor Frankl does. I mean, he created logotherapy, and it was his
hmm,
thing. Sort of, how do you like? It's about creating meaning out of nothingness or of absolute pain. Because what that
yeah,
really does, Charles, that manages to usually actually manages to put the victim, because of course everyone in the Holocaust, this is terrible. They were able to kind of reclaim some of the power, the autonomy, and when they control the meaning, they control the narrative, and then they're the ones who can regain a sense of identity. Because once you lose identity, you're going to be like you said, uh, going in the bathroom, punching a mirror, doing all these things because the identity is being shattered. You don't even recognize who you are. But that's beautiful, man. Because
yeah,
this guy, that's a great answer. I'll say this. That's really
yeah.
a great
And
answer, man.
ultimately, like that's part of what I'm coaching on now, is like that's one of the practices that I teach
Mm,
in my program, is like how to take any sour situation that you've been through in life, how to flip it to a positive and pull a powerful lesson out of it, and walk you through a process where you condition that new response so that you can start to feel you've gone through. Therefore, when in the future, you've reconditioned in your life. Therefore, you find new meaning and new purpose to your entire identity.
goodness, man. That's powerful. That's powerful. We're gonna have to do some work on that together to some capacity because, yeah, it's like how do you rewrite the meaning and how do you find a way to just again, it's reclaim your sense of your ability to make a decision that can actually have
Yeah,
a direct consequence in
yeah,
alignment with some to some extent of what you actually want. Because
yeah,
when that's stripped away of you, man, it's very difficult. Of course, as Viktor
yeah.
Frankl and millions of others know, it's horrific, man. Oh, dude, that's excellent. I don't even know if we can really top that because that one I really like a lot. And we
We can
didn't
top
make
it.
the wisdom. Oh, we can top it. Okay, then let's. I think we go for maybe two more we can have here.
Let's do
Um,
it.
then let's say, oh, that's kind of similar. Okay, then what would be the biggest failure that had occurred? I mean, throughout the conversation, we talked about a lot of challenges, and of course, it depends how you define failure and all that. But something that you wish hadn't happened, but you're glad that it did. If
So
yeah, yeah, because it
I
may
was
not
actually
differentiate from what we talked about, but could be.
no, I was hoping you would ask this question next, and
Okay.
I'm very glad you did,
Oh,
because this is the one that I'm most excited to talk about out of anything.
oh, excellent.
I love a pretty extreme guy. I love skydiving, and I love doing other extreme things like that. So, I was doing a firewalk, and right as the firewalk began, I I feel it right now.
Mm.
I got to this moment inside where suddenly I realized everything that was wrong with my entire life. And I've said this, maybe 100 times before, but this was the biggest revelation yet. And it's that I had allowed my entire life to be controlled by what my parents' destiny for my life was.
Mm.
And so over the course of that firewalk, I walked over it 100 times, and I just
A
reconditioned
hundred
this
times?
new. Yeah, it was a beautiful process, man. It's this gigantic conditioning of this new identity that I was stepping into. It was this physical metaphor of um, of what's that decision that I needed to make, and for me that was deciding to no longer leave the most important decisions in my life up to anyone else. And though they both supported me very much in my of being a model star, whatever whatever it was that I put my mind to, they were all about celebrating me. But to some capacity, that over time it conditioned me to believe that if I did things that displeased them, if I did what I wanted, that it would be displeasing to them, and that would ruin the relationship. And so I had to learn to be okay with that. I had to learn to be okay with rocking the boat. I had to learn to be
Mm.
okay with upsetting people in order to remain my truest, most authentic self, living unapologetically in this world so that I can stay unshakable in my mission, so that I can support and love and serve others the best way that I can. But I can't do that if my decisions are tied to pleasing my parents, and that's unhealthy. That's unhealthy to put that responsibility on them.
Mm-hmm.
That, and you can't really be a good father. You can't really be a good husband if the life that you're living is to please other people. You have to be able to not only carve your own path as a man, but also as a human. As some, like, we're called to interdependence, not codependence.
Mm.
Um, and for me, that was really what it came down to. Was I had allowed some important decisions in my life to be guided by what's going to please my parents, and I didn't step into who I truly am today until I broke free from that. And there's
Mm.
layers to it.
Yeah.
Um, but ultimately, I had to realize that they're still going to love me, and I'm still going to love them. And even if we don't agree, hey, I mean, the world today is not what it used to be 10 years ago.
Oh yeah, dude, it's changing every second. But yeah, specifically 10 years. Yeah. Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So,
Powerful. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
No, I mean it's right on. Like living under not just the shadow, but if you deviate from their plan, and they never indicated that they would show you unconditional love, or that there's room for not succeeding the first try or something like that on something, then what would be the incentive for you to go against the path? because I mean, one,
Mm.
that's territory that's unknown, it's uncharted. There's potential punishment, danger, fear. I mean, and of course we have like a millions-year-old brain. We have the amygdala, fight or flight, everything freaking out. I mean, you want to protect yourself. But I think that's the beauty of what not just love, but a sense of truth can actually do, because it can liberate you from the sense of fear, and it can reaffirm in yourself that hey, mother and father, they're supposed to, like, they're gonna love you and see it through, that you're able to kind of find your own path in a way. And if they're able to do that, man, then that's a blessing. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of children don't have this, and it's like what we were talking about before, where it's so easy to blame someone as like, "Oh, you monster! Oh, you devil!" Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, the journey to, or the road to evil. It's not a light switch, right? We think it's a light
Mm.
switch, which boom. Yeah, I mean, sure, but you also need to get the electricity. You need to get the light switch itself. You need to bolt in the screws. It builds over time.
Yeah.
So that's a big part about showing grace, being humble enough to know that that could have been you. But I would say even the largest form of grace for yourself and for someone else is, how can you manage to forgive and say, hey, let's move on from this, let's build from that, because you are responsible for the decisions you made, but it's not absolutely a determinant of who you're going to be down the road. And for yourself, the way that you can pull from that, pull from the bounds of what a mom or dad may have influenced you to do. I mean, it takes courage, and also finding out who is Charles Meyer and what does he ultimately want to do with his life.
So, it's so funny how we allow all these different overlaps to happen in our lives. Um, and I'd say one of the most interesting ways that all of this has been intertwined with who I am today is expectations. We have
Oh,
expectations that reality is going to meet our belief systems,
mm-hmm.
and so
Yep.
it doesn't matter necessarily what even actions we put out there if our beliefs are not based in reality. And you can have someone next door that believes something completely different. And I mean, I live next to people that believe things completely differently from me, but I mean, we all know how to get along. Now, even then, um, they are living completely different lives, maybe a couple hundred feet away from me. And so the expectations, that if the world were to end, or or there was a civilizational collapse, or whatever happens, you know, a part of me would say, hey, I expect them to be a certain way. But even I think some movies do a really great job of displaying this, how we expect people to be civil, but the reality is it typically brings out this side of us that has been suppressed for so long. We go back to this fight or flight, and so when how I'm trying to relate this right now is that it comes down to, even in my marriage, and even in my business relationships, we have these expectations of how other people are supposed to interact with us. You have these expectations of what a civil conversation looks like. We have these expectations of how to respond accordingly, or what jokes are okay or not okay. Everything around us is about beliefs, expectations, and actions that either condition our identity or break it. And
Mm.
if it breaks it, how do we choose to respond to that? Do we try and force our way in an uncivilized manner to scrounge back what we can of that loose identity that we held beforehand, or do we choose to accept change and remove expectations from what we want the outcomes to be of our interactions with the world around us? Like,
Mm.
I left myself devastated and disappointed with most of my life because I had these expectations of how things should be. And when I started removing those expectations, I was able to see the world for how it is and appreciate all my blessings. Not only did that bring me as grounded as I am today in the present, but also it created a way for me to start to view, as we had talked about, a glass being half full, or even if it's half empty, still has air. It's still a solid glass,
Yeah. Yeah.
and like, even, I mean, to personal responsibility to remove expectation, to receive change willingly, and love people where they're at without trying to fix or change them. Because
Mm,
I mean,
that's
I'm
great.
not their savior, and
That's really
if
big,
I
actually.
were, I mean, the world's in trouble.
Yeah.
We like
Right.
we can only help each other get so far. I can help the people immediately behind me, but I mean, I'm still looking for people to pull me up.
Mm. Yeah, and you look at how it can, in theory, become a not in theory, but really actually becoming a domino effect in a way, right?
Yeah.
Where it's not. I mean, there's it's a book. It's called 12 Rules for Life, and one of them is
Yep.
like it's I'm gonna forget it, but it's basically like one of them that's really nice is it's like clean your room or something like that, and it's not just working on the internal before you criticize the external, because just but literally think about this just like logically or even just yeah, very rationally, like what can you control, and then okay, put in the certain inputs that can change the output. But if you can't change the
Yeah.
inputs, then you expect a different output. That's wishful thinking. That isn't going to probably go anywhere. And if it does, you're going to say, "Oh, look at that." It's like a superstition. Like, "Oh, if I snap my fingers 3 times before I shoot this basketball and I make it, that's because I snapped my finger 3 times." Like,
Yeah.
come on, give me a break. I mean, it just
And
really
I'm
changes
all
the whole
for a
thing.
ritual.
No, I look. I mean,
No, go
look.
ahead.
I play basketball. When I shoot my free
Yeah.
throws, I get to the line, spin the ball backwards. There's about maybe 7 rotations. Dribble
Yeah.
twice, inhale, look at the rim, exhale, bend my knees, come up, bend my knees again, and then follow through. I do that every single time for the past like three
Mm.
years. I'm about it. Just what are we going to do to realize that some things are in our control and some things aren't? Which there
Yeah.
is an overlap with Stoicism, and that's a school of thought that I actually really resonate with. I really
Yeah.
admire it quite a bit. And again, to that endless concept, you have the neighbors who are very different. Okay, but you still get along. Great. Why?
Yeah.
Because there's certain behaviors you're taking, like certain actions you're taking that are stemming from beliefs, because all actions and choices stem from beliefs, right? Your belief is
Hmm.
the prereq for a choice, an action, a behavior that's taken. Boom. With your neighbors, you're able to connect because you have, correct me if I'm wrong, but are going in with the intent, not maybe how do we be best friends, but how can we connect with others? How can
Yeah.
we not just be civil, but even maybe an hour ago in the conversation talking about, I think what makes us have the ability to succeed, right? It was like nature, nurture, a balance of this stuff.
Yep.
It's really our ability to work together that brings us to success. Because,
Yeah.
Charles, on your own, could you figure out the numerical system? Let's say if you were a baby born in the jungle, would you, by the time you're 30, if you live that long and you were eaten by snakes or cheetahs, whatever, that you would have been able to create the numerical system from 0 to 10 or 0 to 9, let's say, know what these symbols are, and create units of math and measurement all on your own? Of
Definitely
course
not.
not. Dude, it's insane. So, like, oh my God, seriously. It's
Yeah.
the collaboration we have that can, if we put the minds together, that can do that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Absolutely.
But we don't want to do this because it seems if we do take, and this is a point that I'm learning recently that you've done very well, where you're talking about accepting criticism and things like that, which I've really improved on this. I do it if it makes sense, right? If the criticism makes sense, I'll take it. If not, I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, does something about this make sense? But once you start to do that, you're gonna find out that you slowed down in order to speed up. You pulled back
Mm.
the bow and arrow in order to shoot further, right? That's kind
Yes.
of and that's what you've been doing for the past, it's now, I mean, years. And look at the results you're getting now. Look at the outcome. Look at who you're influencing. And where did that begin? Did that begin with the external or the internal?
Dude, yeah, it all began with that internal man
That's it.
because I mean, reading that 12 Rules for Life book, I mean, clean your
Yes,
room.
sir.
That was the biggest takeaway because
That's it.
like
Yeah.
everything was a mess. And then I
Oh.
decided, hey, I'm unhappy with this. I had to raise my standard
Mm.
both internally and externally. But when you work on one, you can affect the other, but internal over external every
Yeah,
time,
but when you work on the external, how does the internal really change in a way?
Yeah, there
It
there
can, but
you
there's so
go.
much chance and circumstance, and
Yeah.
a lot of it is luck. But what do you control?
So I have an interesting thing about this. My family, or I mean, the family I was born into, we have a garage, most much like most people do, and
Yeah.
either you have a garage that is extremely organized, or you have a garage that it looks like a bomb went off,
Oh my
and that
gosh.
was
One or
ours.
the other. One or the other.
Yeah, and so that was how I learned how to keep a house. And we had a
Mm.
very nice house. It was very clean all the time, but we would clean it and it would be immediately messy. Then we would clean it again and it would be immediately messy. And it was not just
Right.
about our external dynamic; it was about everything that was going on inside of us. If we had
Oh,
to raise that standard, our external would have consistently reflected, not just
right.
for a little bit. And that was ultimately what I had to make a change in my life when I got married, was that I had to change the internal to see consistent external results, because otherwise you're just on this roller coaster and eventually you're going to get burnt out, and
Wow. Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
Like
ultimately,
your results are a reflection of your standards, is kind of what you're
yeah,
getting at. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I saw those same results when I was making 8-figure quotas, and then I would be at a low point and I'd only make 7 figures, and then I be at a high point at making 8-figure quotas again, low point 7 figures, and it all had to reflect of my internal state.
Mm, mm. And it's yeah, how the internal state. I mean, the standards thing is so key, man. I mean, when it comes to the garage is a nice metaphor, specifically though when it's coming in the marriage aspect, that it's not necessarily trying to change the other person because you really can't. You can influence, but what are you? You can change yourself. That's a fact. Of
Yeah,
course you can. 100%. I mean, who in the world would disagree with that, right?
yeah,
And when you do that, look at how the other things are going to flourish. And this is what I always share, that what is the worst outcome of you learning a couple new skills, a couple new methods, a couple new techniques, whatever, that helps you gain more value as a person?
yeah,
If you do that, and let's say the result is the person you're dating or your romantic interest or something, it doesn't work out, okay,
hmm,
great. But you still are building a foundation and you're creating a pattern of certain habits that, instead of you going from a state of being unconsciously incompetent, that you don't even know that you're not like that you don't even know where you're lacking, that's the lowest state, and then transitioning to the point where you're unconsciously competent, that you don't even have
yeah,
to think about it, and you're operating within this relationship of any dynamic, and it's autopilot and it's in alignment with who you are, but because again
yes,
you've not eliminated the external, but you've refocused on the internal, which is really where your control ultimately lies. That's where it's at, man. That's where it's at. And I
yeah,
wish it was easier said than done. I wish it was, but sometimes it is. Like, reach that
yeah,
threshold, and then like don't. This is how I'll say it. And I want to pass it back to you. It's at a certain
yeah,
point, and this is what really got me into not doing things that are really mundane and just wanting to read and learn like a maniac as much as I can, because it gets very cyclical, the patterns. And
yeah,
how does that not get boring at a certain point? Because you're really like, are you living one life? No, you're, for me, it's like you're living a lot of fragmented lives, but
mm,
there's an illusion that you're living one that's consistent and that's in alignment with what you want. And maybe
yes,
that's a little complicated, but to simplify that point, it's autopilot isn't necessarily bad or wrong, just is it in alignment with what you want? And are you experiencing more than one life in the one life you actually have?
yeah. It's so it's so funny, man. The coaching program that I run, it's around identifying who gave you your programming, and then
Ooh,
we reprogram.
yep.
Because so much of it does have to do with who's making the rules, and if you enter that next phase of your life, you can't bring old tools to new rules. You
Oh,
know?
whoa. Okay, I gotta write that down. That is one I
Oh,
have to.
dude.
I mean, there's a handful, but this one immediately. You can't bring old tools to new rules.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my gosh,
And
dude.
like, I mean, there's a billion different nuances, but I'd say that's a pretty solid one that I've used consistently as I learn to accept change in life.
Ooh, that's
And
fire,
it's,
man. Oh
I
my
would say
gosh.
an adjacent lesson I've learned through that would be that you can only heal what you can feel. So if you
Ooh, bro,
suppress
you gotta
what
slow
you
down.
need to, yeah, it's
Okay, you can only
the
heal. You can only. So good.
you can only heal what you can feel. And the reason this is adjacent is because if you don't heal, then you allow that wound to affect every area of your life, your
Right.
business,
Right.
relationships, your everything. And so you're bringing an old tool to a new rule. That
Wow.
old tool is your way of handling certain patterns in life. The new tool is where you learn to say, okay, this old thing isn't working anymore. Maybe, oh, hey, holy crap, I was hurt in this one area of life. Maybe if I find healing from this, I can learn how to move forward without expecting to receive pain in what appears to be a similar future situation, which really isn't, but it reminds me of something that I've gone through in the past
Mm,
that causes me
right.
pain. So you heal
Yes.
through it, then you can change the pattern. So reprogramming, it's not brainwash, it's not hypnotism. It's looking at the science of our psychology and saying what needs were not met in a healthy way and how can I learn to meet those and
Yes, man. Yes, 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 yes.
serve those around me.
Yeah, there's a great well, there's a model that's called the six human needs.
Yeah.
And like one of the prime examples is the need for significance, right?
Yep.
And one example that can be given is you can meet the need for significance in a myriad of ways.
Yeah.
Now, someone can meet significance by, helping a neighbor, helping someone who's sick, helping at the soup kitchen or something like that. Now, someone else, let's say in the inner city or where there's more poverty to some extent, let's say they feel so insignificant. Now, what happens if they go to town with a gun, go to your face and say, "Hey, give me all your money," or like whatever? How
Mm.
significant is that person now? A
Yeah.
million. I mean, dude, nothing else matters in that moment, right?
Yep.
So, but like you're saying, what vehicle are they using in order to get to that need that they're trying to fulfill?
Yeah.
They're after the same thing, significance. Just what path are you going to take? What vehicle are you going to take? A car? Are you going to take a bike? Are you going to take a scooter? Are you going to take a
Hmm.
skateboard? Are you going to take a plane? Just how are you going to get to that point?
Yeah.
And what are their outcomes going to be? Probably
Mm.
the person with the gun may go to jail, may kill someone. My God, and the other person probably is going to go home feeling richer and more fulfilled
Yeah.
because of the choice like they made.
Absolutely, man.
The reprogramming.
Personal responsibility is so important. And that's why it is each of our personal responsibilities to heal, to bring new rules and new tools to the table, to bring our changes, our experiences, our lessons, to bring our vulnerability ultimately. But that only comes from a place of authenticity. And so,
Yep.
in order to find that way that you can serve the world better each and every day, you really do got to start with authenticity. Get
Mm.
vulnerable, get real, bring your real self, because when you do that, it attracts the right people. It
Yeah.
brings you become a magnet for that which you seek. So
Mm.
I had this renter one time who was um, he was not really in a good place in life, and all he attracted was people that were homeless, people that were drug dealers, and I mean, those were the people that he naturally found, and it, it was a very sad example because over time, what ended up happening um, was he found this person who was schizophrenic, 19, and ended up stabbing this dude, like my renter's boss, in a house that was maybe 5 minutes from where we
Whoa.
live.
Jeez.
Everyone knows where my friend lives. The friend makes a decision to call the cops on the dude, which best decision he ever could have made. Um, and ultimately, like, I thought that was a really crazy thing to do for him to even get mixed up in this in the first place. But that was a result of the actions that he took to surround himself with the people that he did because of the mannerisms he displayed and the emotional outcomes that he received from being around those people. And that led me to fly down, to another state and spend time there, which I got to spend the best time of my life with my wife, well, now wife, and like so I got some goodness out of it. The Everyone ended up okay. The one dude, I hope he's okay. He's in prison now, but I really hope that
Mm.
he's really bettering his life and he's reflecting on the decisions that were made. And I, got rid of that renter. Don't talk to him anymore. Not in a good place, but I really hope he's
Yeah.
like I've got all the love in the world for him. I mean, he's a good kid. So
Mm.
it really does come down ultimately to um, the personal responsibility that we each hold. I could never change him. He could never change me. But he also viewed me like I was his parent because his parents were pretty controlling.
Mm.
And so he saw me as that new authority figure in his life. So he associated my role as a landlord with that of a parent trying to control him and make decisions for his life. Um, and so it was this horrible dynamic because you know, he surrounded himself with the wrong people, and because I allowed that to pour over into my life, I mean, I was impacted by that. Oh, but you know, do I, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Maybe.
Mm.
Um, one of the time that I really did that the only way forward was to accept, okay, this is happening. Time to make some changes in my personal life. Time to make some very impactful decisions. And I'm going to do my best to love everyone in this process. But ultimately, I have to be aligned with what's most important to me. Otherwise, I can please everyone else and I can be dead in the process. So
Oof. Yeah,
I
yeah.
had to be authentic. I had to be real about, hey, I'm freaked out. I am scared. I will admit that, but I'm not going to allow myself to be driven by fear. I'm going to dance with it. I'm going to attack fear. I'm going to go
Yes.
after it.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
And for me, that looked like take a moment, breathe, get strategic with what I want to do with my life in this moment. And it is not go and run away. It is not stay hunkered down here. It is get out as fast as I can with a plan in place. And it all ties back to that analogy. Bow. Um, I I had to take a second to say, hey, I feel like there's backlash coming to the house. I don't want to be here when things go down. Nothing even happened, but I was not prepared for a situation like that. So personal responsibility lesson for me:
Yep.
check your renters better next time.
Oh,
Next
well, that's
lesson:
noted.
have that emotional awareness under control.
Hmm.
Um,
Man,
don't shut down. Stay connected. Stay present because that's the only way that you can create the best outcome possible. And that was ultimately what happened. Um, so I think that,
Charles.
that that was one of my most powerful examples.
No, I mean it's recognizing the role that you can play and always understanding that there is an influence you can have for someone without even knowing it. I
Yeah.
mean, dude, everyone we interact with is playing. I mean, just think about even if you're watching a movie, because we talk about life being a movie, really. Let's say
Yeah.
you're the main character, sure, and you have all the extras. They may be irrelevant, but they're still like they're supporting cast. There's an interaction. It helps develop the character, the arc, the different variables, all these things. So I mean, that's a great spot, man. And look, we're gonna have to do this one again because this was beautiful. I am gonna
Dude,
head,
yeah.
but before we go, I do want to just, I mean, thank you, man, for just the insight. This is, I mean, my goodness, we go so deep, and I'm excited for the field you're going into because that's a field that I'm also in myself and just working to build. So of course, we'll talk about stuff with this. And like you said, you really were concluding there about the vulnerability and the authenticity, and look at what that has brought you. And for others who listen to this, and just the other people you speak with, that neighbor who's outside at 3 a.m. on the phone yelling, does she need reprimandation or to be reprimanded, or does she need grace, love, acceptance,
Yeah.
caring? Right? I mean, hurt people, and healed people
Yeah.
heal people, or healing
Yes.
people. Because I don't know if you're ever fully healed. I
Yeah.
think it's always a process, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
always a process. But Charles, a pleasure. If you want to do a little plug, or I mean, I'll put the links and stuff at the end for anything. You have the books. I'll put place to find your website because I know that you created one. I checked it out. It was like the questionnaire thing that you did. So I'll include
Yes.
that. And any
Okay.
parting words? Any parting words you want to leave with?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to say that if you're in a place, whoever you are listening out there, if you're in a place where you have all of this pain stacked up and you're not sure what to do with it, the battle begins and ends with your willingness and desire to live the life that you need to live, to become who you need to become, to serve the way that you need to serve. For me, that relates back to the story of falling in my grave over and over again. I reached a boiling point where I knew change needed to happen, and it started with me, and it started now. And if I didn't make that change, I never would. So if you knew you need to make a change, make the change before you give up on making that change. It starts
Mm.
with the decision to live. And that link that I to my website right now, that's an application to get in touch with me and figure out if we're right to work together. So I appreciate that plug, man. Thank you.
Oh man, I'm gonna put it there too, man. And like a question that you can conclude with that I like to ask after these conversations is saying, yeah, it's got to happen eventually. I just don't know when. You can always ask them, I hear what you're saying. So when would now be a good time?
Ooh.
When would now be? No, what do you wait?
Mm.
Oh, now, yeah, because it's a little
Yeah.
preemptive, but man, a pleasure. I do have the little rendezvous I do got to attend to, my friend. I mean, we're gonna end here and then we'll conclude in the separate thing.
Okay.
But a pleasure. I mean, I'm excited to share this. This I believe is probably one of my best ones yet because it definitely resonated and there's a lot of overlap. So I appreciate it, Charles. I'm gonna end it here and then we'll talk for a bit.
Sounds good, man.
All right.
I'll talk to you next time.
All right.